Women only date up. I've said this many times on this channel, and I also had it as one of the three main pillars of what this channel preaches. This idea goes beyond just looks too. The same principles are true when talking about height, status, muscles, social circle, money, and basically anything else that can come to mind. This is why in this video I'm going to be delving deep into explaining the 7 reasons for why this concept is a fact of modern dating, and as far as the future goes, the rate of what I call dating inflation is only looking to become more exacerbated every passing year. Reason number 1, we'll start with some evolution and biology. When masculinity is larger than femininity, it is seen as attractive. Here are some figures for you. In a study of 27,000 people, 68% of women said it is essential, i.e. non-negotiable, that their partner has a steady income. Meanwhile, only 17% of men did. In another study, this one of 12,500 couples, 95% of men were measured as taller than their female partners, with an average height difference of 15 centimeters or 6 inches for you American folks. 92% of men, that's pretty much everybody, said they wouldn't mind marrying someone who earns less than them. But just under half of women said the same. And this last one I find the most shocking. 76% of men, that's 3 out of 4, are willing to go into debt to woo a love interest. 57% of women said they'd do the same, which is hardly better, but either way, I personally think these numbers should be at least 10 times lower than what they are. And the fact that over half the population thinks faking it till they make it is acceptable is mind-boggling to me. Anyway, to wrap up this first point, in each of these statistics, it's clear men are either trying to establish an advantage, or in the case of height, are literally born to be taller. This links back to this idea that masculinity needs to be stronger in order for a man to be seen as attractive. Deeply rooted in our biology is this concept that masculinity represents dominance, leadership, and power, meanwhile femininity represents submissiveness and admiration. So it's a no-brainer why women find better-looking, taller, wealthier men more attractive. Anyway, now moving on to the next reason, which is probably the most simple but also the most important. Because they can and men can't. Imagine you work a job and you're offered a 10k promotion despite putting minimal effort into your current position. Would you take this opportunity? The answer, of course, is yes. Why wouldn't you? Your life will be made so much easier. So, tying this example to dating, when women have hundreds of guys reaching out to them in their DMs, thousands of guys matching with them on dating apps, why wouldn't they select only the best ones? Do these women deserve all this attention? Have they put in any work besides being born pretty and taking a few selfies? The answers to both of these questions doesn't really matter in my opinion, because either way, it won't stop women from chasing only the top guys. It sounds like common sense to me that if you're presented with too many options to count, of course you're going to funnel down to the best ones and focus on those. I've said before, if men were born as women, they'd be taking advantage of the ease of dating exactly the same way. Anyway, what I want to expand more on in this point is what got us to this extremely unequal stage of the dating market in the first place. Why is it that women can date up so easily while most men struggle to get even a response from their looks match? Well, to put simply, the reality of why dating is so easy for women is because men make it so easy for them. Just think about this for a second. When you zoom out and look at the entire dating process as a whole, you'll see that every step of the way it is men who are happy to take all counts of responsibility and effort off of women's shoulders, so the men can pick up and bear these weights themselves. Stage 1. A man sees a woman at a bar and one of them needs to make the first move. The man thinks, don't worry, I'll be the one to approach and take the risk of rejection myself. You just sit tight and let me come to you. Stage 2. Later in the night, when they now need to exchange phone numbers, the man thinks, don't worry, I'll be the one to ask for your number and see if you're interested in meeting again for a date. Stage 3, on the date itself when things are going good, but they're both too nervous to initiate a kiss. Once more, the man thinks, "Don't worry, I'll be the one to lean in and go for the kiss, again risking rejection." This cycle continues with arranging the second date, establishing a relationship, and in fact it continues all the way up until the man has to get on one knee and ask the question. At no points do women have to take any risks or put in any efforts. It is all on the man to take care of these things. And perhaps what's most baffling about all of this is that in each of these stages, if women did step up and take responsibility, they'd have a success rate magnitudes better than what the average man would have. If a man hits on 100 girls in the street, he'd be lucky to get 2 or 3 dates from this. If a woman does the same, she'd comfortably land around 50. So, why don't women take advantage of this? Well, when women already have too many guys approaching them, why would they want to increase that number even higher? Women have a problem in dating of too much abundance. Trying to have more options beyond this will be like being forced to eat another meal when you're already full. And out of the dozens of guys women are already being approached by, why wouldn't they be greedy and why wouldn't they raise their standards? When men stoop so low, they are only allowing themselves to be trodden on. Now moving on to reason 3, which is a crucial evolutionary reason. The investment that goes into having babies is far, far greater for women than it is for men. To explain this, we'll need to rewind the clock to tens of thousands of years ago. In this time, resources were extremely scarce, and the biggest investment any person would have to make is when shall I have babies and who with? Well, for men, we can boil down their answer to pretty much just one factor. Is the woman attractive? Now, I know there are other elements involved when men decide partner suitability, and I'll explain them later in the video, but for now we'll just focus on this one idea. If a man finds another woman attractive, he'll see her as a suitable partner to reproduce with. And since men can reproduce with lots of women in a short amount of time, it makes sense for a man to find most women attractive to maximize the quantity of times he passes on his genes. In contrast, when women have to gauge the attractiveness of a potential partner, it's likely their standards will be much higher. The speed at which a woman can reproduce is capped at a painfully slow 9 months per reproduction cycle. And because of this, she'll want to make sure for the small handful of times she gets pregnant in her lifetime, it's only with the highest quality guys available. When we talk about dating standards, I see it as a balancing of two forces: quantity and quality. If a person increases their standards, e.g. raises their bar of what they're willing to accept from a 4 to a 7, it means they now have a greater priority of quality, which in turn, as you can see, decreases their quantity. Meanwhile, if a person decreases their standards, it means they are gaining quantity at the expense of quality. And as already stated, men have a natural dating strategy that lends itself to caring mostly about quantity, and thus having lower overall standards. Meanwhile, for women, because of their long reproduction cycles, they are mostly concerned with quality. No woman wants to get pregnant with an average to below average guy, only for a couple weeks into her pregnancy a higher value man comes along starting to show her interest. When a woman gets pregnant, her chips are effectively locked down on the table for a minimum of 9 months, and possibly longer if you include all the time actually having to raise the child. But for men, this is simply not the same. If a man reproduces with a woman he's on the fence about committing to, it will never be too late for him to experiment with other options if the woman he's currently with happens to get pregnant. Now, of course, if a man chooses to do this, I'm not saying it is moral and won't go without consequences. The main risks are he may face banishment from the rest of the tribe for leaving his partner at her most vulnerable state, and he'll also have to deal with a heavy amount of internal guilt as he begins to realise the drastic consequences of abandoning his partner and child. This explains why most men won't have intimacy with just anybody, even though sleeping with an unattractive woman represents an opportunity to pass on genes. Most men have at least a minimum standard of attractiveness to stop them biting off more than they can chew. Most men have this baseline to protect themselves from getting too many women pregnant who aren't worth the risk of the social consequences. I'd like to point out the science of why we find people attractive in the first place. Attraction is an instantaneous and subconscious calculation our brains make in order to measure a person's genetic quality, i.e. is a person capable of producing healthy and fertile offspring. And if a person falls below a certain level of attractiveness, it may indicate their future offspring has a lesser chance of survival and therefore will unlikely grow to adulthood to reproduce themselves to continue the cycle of life. Reason number 4, and this reason also has its roots in evolution. When women are looking for a potential partner, it's not just the attractiveness of a man they will be worried about. They'll also be making sure he has lots of other things going for him too. Namely, these 2 things. 1, the man's trustworthiness / level of commitment, and 2, how efficient the man is at gathering resources. The first one is important as it ensures if a woman has a child with a certain guy, he won't just leave her to fend for herself after giving birth or during the pregnancy. And the second one is equally as important as it ensures her child will have a man to provide a nourishing upbringing, therefore increasing the child's chance of survival. It's extremely important a woman is able to get these 2 boxes ticked when choosing a partner, because if she doesn't, she'll have either a lazy and weak man to raise her child, or worse, no man at all. And whichever she ends up with, both are sub-ideal and could potentially be deadly for both herself and her child. So in order to reduce the risk of this outcome, her standards will naturally increase to make sure she locks down a man who is a loyal, strong, and protecting provider. On the other hand, when looking at men and the standards they'll have, neither of these 2 things really apply. Now, of course, a man wants her partner to be trustworthy, but this is mainly to ensure the baby his partner gives birth to is biologically his. As for the ability to provide or having physical strength, men don't really care at all if a woman has these things, and if anything, when looking at physical strength, this can actually work against her. Some people watching right now might argue that this entire reason isn't relevant in the modern day because the nature of the way children are raised today is wildly different compared to how things were many thousands of years ago. For example, in today's day and age, if a woman finds herself raising a child on her own, it's hardly the end of the world for her because even in a worst case scenario, she'll simply be able to rely on the state to prop up her situation. However, I have 2 reasons to counter this argument. 1. The lifestyle the state can provide for single parents isn't exactly glamorous. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Most state-supported families find themselves hovering around the poverty line, which is a far from ideal environment any mother would want to raise her child in. And 2, although circumstances have changed, those circumstances will never be able to overcome the tens of thousands of years of evolution that puts values like trustworthiness and the ability to provide at the forefront of women's minds when they are looking for viable partners. It's the same reasoning as to why we as men find women with makeup more attractive, even though we know that it is completely unrelated to a woman's fertility and genetics. You just simply can't reprogram the human brain overnight to comply with the circumstances of the world today. Anyway, the bottom line is, women have evolved slightly different to men in the respect that they have a list of standards that goes beyond just physical attractiveness. So it only follows that if women's list is longer, they're going to be harder to please and thus more likely to want to date up. Anyway, that's the first 4 reasons, and now I've got those out the way, now is a good time to press the like button and leave any thoughts you have in the comments below, as it helps the YouTube algorithm. Now moving on to reason number 5, and this is the final biological reason. The duration of women's peak fertility years are far shorter than men's. If you take a look at this graph, you can see men have a fertility window that starts just after puberty and then more or less stays with them, only decreasing gradually past the age of 30 and steeply past the age of 45. In contrast, women have a fertility window which again starts just after puberty, but then plummets as soon as she hits 30. And in fact, by the age of 45, a woman's chances of conceiving become pretty much zero. So, why is this relevant? Well, it highlights women have far more to lose early on in life if they waste their precious peak fertility years. And what could potentially be a huge waste of these years? Being in the wrong relationship. Envision this, a man and woman both get into a relationship fresh out of high school at age 18 and manage to stay with one another for 10 full years. They're now both 28 years old and the girlfriend starts having thoughts about starting a family and getting married. Unfortunately though, the boyfriend has other ideas involving bigger personal ambitions. He had recently received an offer of a huge job opportunity from a large company. The only catch though is if he accepts the offer, he'll have to work abroad in another country so long as he is in the role. Now, before I carry on with the story, I'd like to point out just for a second how realistic this scenario is. The average age women get married in the West is 28 years old, and the average age of first child is 29. So, for this couple who are both 28, it's usually around this point in life when they're thinking of getting married and starting a family, or alternatively doubling down on their careers in order to skyrocket their income. And unfortunately for the girlfriend in this situation, neither of them are on the same page. When the man tells his girlfriend that he's keen on the job move, it causes her to become visibly angry and upset. A major argument breaks out as they each believe the other person is heading in a different direction in life. So, after the 10 long years they've been together, they both reach the same conclusion and agree to end the relationship. Anyway, the reason I included all this detail is so that we could get to this exact point here. We now have two people, fresh out of a relationship, fresh on the dating market for the first time in 10 years, which only begs the question, who is now in a better position for the future of their dating life? Well, if we take a look at both, starting with the man, I think it's safe to say he's not actually doing too bad. Obviously, he's not as young as he used to be, but he's got a well-paying job waiting for him on the horizon, for which he'll be able to work for a few years until he has enough money so he can start to scale back. And then, at this point, he'll be somewhere in his early to mid-30s, which still leaves him enough time so he can move back to his hometown with a focus on dating and eventually starting a family. In contrast, when we take a look at the woman's situation, even immediately after the breakup, things already are not looking too great for her. She's at the tail end of her peak, and as far as the future goes, she'll be fighting an uphill battle dating-wise. From now on, each year that passes will only lead to her losing more points of attractiveness and having less of a chance of being able to start a family. So, after examining both of their situations, why is it that the man seems to be in a much better position? Well, it all comes down to this fact that men have larger fertility windows. This also means men age slower, and therefore for the man in the story, so long as he looks after himself, it's unlikely he'll lose anything more than a point of attractiveness between 28 and 35. But as for the woman, she should expect to lose at least one and possibly two. The essence of this point I'm making is that women have a far greater risk with regard to wasting time by being in the wrong relationship too early in life. You can almost say time ticks twice as fast for women than it does for men. Anyway, the bottom line is that because of this fact that women have a lot more to lose from the ages of 18 to 30, it makes sense that they will naturally have way stricter standards when it comes to deciding who they want to get into a relationship with. Therefore, unless you're the guy that ticks all of a woman's boxes and makes her time worthwhile, there'll be a very slim chance she'll give you the time of day and view you as a potential long-term partner. Reason number 6, and this is somewhat related to the last point but unique in a completely different way. failed relationships are more costly from a social standpoint for women than men. Question: after a man and woman breaks up, on average, who do you think sees more damage to their future dating prospects? I think the answer should be fairly obvious. It's the woman, as I'm about to explain. Pre-selection is the idea that a man is seen as higher value if a woman is currently or has previously dated him in the past. The logic is simple. Other women have dated this man previously, so maybe I should too. He's already got a box ticked that other loser men don't, as he's at least got some women chasing after him. Therefore, clearly the man with women chasing after him is in high demand and therefore also high value. This line of reasoning works when looking at the value of men, but the opposite is true when looking at women. If a woman has had a lot of prior dating and relationship experience, it's often a negative sign in the eyes of men. She's promiscuous, she can't keep a man, she causes problems in relationships are all common remarks made against these women. I'd hate to be the next guy to date her after all those other guys. Here's another reason why men see it as a bad sign, and I'll explain it as an example. If a woman has had 10 ex-partners like this woman here, all from the same social circle, and then she starts dating someone new, if the social circle is still tight, it's highly probable the new boyfriend will have a worry his girlfriend will cheat on him with one of her previous partners. And he's rightly so for thinking this too. She's shown the ultimate form of physical attraction and investment to 10 of her exes, and there's no reason for that attraction to instantly dissolve after the breakups. Now, of course, over the duration of the new relationship, the girlfriend may never go behind her boyfriend's back, and he could be having this worry unnecessarily. But let's just assume for a second the worst case scenario. The girlfriend does go behind her boyfriend's back and sleeps with one of her exes. And if we were also to assume she falls pregnant from this, which is the whole point of intimacy in the first place, if these two things were to happen, the outcome will be the boyfriend will have no idea the baby being born is his or one of his girlfriend's exes. This is where the worry just spoken about originates from. A man has no guarantee that when he has intimacy with his girlfriend, the resulting baby is his or some random other guy's. In this Reddit post, the man is right to be concerned about the fact his current girlfriend is best friends with one of her exes. I think this part I've underlined here tells you everything you need to know. You can fill in the gaps about what is more than likely going on. As I say, the physical attraction was there before, and there's no reason it won't still be after. So now, if we go back to the 10 exes example, but this time the opposite, so we have a man with 10 failed partners. If the man were to find a new girlfriend, she will have less to be worried about if he goes behind her back, because if and when she has children, she has it as a biological guarantee that the baby she gives birth to is hers and contains her DNA. It's for this reason why I believe cheating is worse when a woman does it to a man than the other way round. And it's also why many believe paternity tests should be mandatory in childbirth in order to equalise this discrepancy, that women automatically know their child is theirs when it's born, meanwhile men don't. Anyway, bringing this back to the original point. Because breakups affect a woman's future chances in dating as it incites this worry into men who are afraid she will cheat, it means women are going to be far more stringent when selecting a partner to go into a relationship with. Their standards need to be set high to make sure they don't pay the price if and when the relationship fails. Meanwhile, for men, any relationship, success or fail can be a positive for them as they gain notoriety as a pre-selected man, as well as many other benefits like companionship, relationship experience and overall pleasure/good times. Lastly, moving on to reason 7, women have a social pressure to date up. In rare cases where unattractive guys do get into relationships with women, the woman is almost sure to face heavy judgment and criticism from her female friends. They will constantly remind her that she can do better, she's too good for him. What's more is most women in relationships have a handful of beta orbiters who will always pander to her whenever she has a problem with her boyfriend. These orbiters only blow more smoke and reinforce this idea that every woman deserves better. This leads to a strong pressure for women to shoot for the stars when it comes to their dating standards, as they're constantly told no man will ever be good enough. Arguably though, what's more interesting about this point is that when it comes to what men experience, they get the complete opposite treatment when receiving comments about their girlfriend. Just take a look at this TikTok and guess what the comments will be. So, in this couple, clearly the man is way more attractive from an objective standpoint than the woman. He is literally a Chad. But have you believe when you look at the comments, it's not people pointing out this obvious fact. Rather, it's filled with people telling him how lucky he is to have her. They're all saying how great they look together and how lucky he is. And no, I've not cherry-picked these comments to make a point. It's a matter of fact, the second most common comments I found were actually pointing at the absence of hate they were receiving. Almost as if people were anticipating it after watching the video. Anyway, getting back to the point, it seems whenever men get a relationship, regardless of the perceived quality on the outside, they are told the girl should mean the whole world to him. But when women get a relationship, they are told the man means nothing and she can always do better. Where did this double standard come from? What this means is women get led to believe they all deserve a top shelf guy. Meanwhile, men are encouraged to settle as they're led to believe their current girlfriend will be the only chance they'll ever get. This ties in nicely with the bottom line of this video, which is that women will not date a man out of pity. There is no safety net as a man, and there are no sympathy dates being handed out to the guys at the bottom who always find themselves out of luck. The only way to make it in this dating world as a man is by being worth something. And whether you believe the key to this is being born with 6-foot genetics and model tier good looks, or by climbing the ladder through building a 10 out of 10 body and gaining status, it doesn't matter. So long you have something to bring to the table, you will be able to satisfy the reality that women only date up. Anyway, that's the video guys. I know this was a very long one, so if you've enjoyed this, make sure you press the like button and leave any thoughts you have in the comments below, as it helps the YouTube algorithm.